Billionaire gave his credit card to a poor single mother for 24 hours. What she did made him cry. The security camera at Westfield Mall captured it all. A harried young woman counting coins at the pharmacy counter, her sick child coughing in the shopping cart, only to have her card declined when trying to pay for children's medicine. What happened next stunned everyone watching. A well-dressed stranger handed her his black credit card and walked away. But what the cameras couldn't record was the note he'd scribbled on the receipt: unlimited funds for 24 hours. Show me what matters most. No one could have predicted that Sarah Jenkins, a struggling single mother working 3 jobs, would use billionaire Alexander Morgan's spontaneous experiment not to buy luxuries for herself, but to change the lives of dozens of strangers in ways that would force him to confront the emptiness of his own existence and the forgotten promise he'd made to his dying mother 20 years earlier. If you're already feeling the pull of this unexpected connection between two people from vastly different worlds, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us how true wealth isn't measured by what's in our bank accounts, but by what's in our hearts, and how sometimes the people with the least to give are the ones who teach us the most about generosity. Alexander Morgan was bored. At 45, the tech billionaire had accumulated more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. His investment firm, Morgan Ventures, had funded some of the most successful startups of the past decade, multiplying his already substantial inheritance to the point where money had become merely a number on a screen, abstract and meaningless. He stood in line at the mall pharmacy, an unusual location for a man who typically sent assistants to handle such mundane tasks. But his regular migraine medication had run out during his unexpected stay in this mid-sized Midwestern city, where he was overseeing the acquisition of a promising medical technology company. Rather than wait for his assistant to arrive tomorrow, he decided to get the prescription himself. It was a decision born partly of necessity and partly of a restlessness that had been growing within him lately. A sense that something was missing, despite having everything money could buy. The woman ahead of him in line caught his attention, not because she was particularly striking, but because of the quiet desperation in her posture. She wore scrubs beneath a worn jacket, suggesting she'd come directly from work. The child in her shopping cart, a boy of perhaps 5 or 6, coughed continuously, his small face flushed with fever. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the pharmacist was saying, "but your card has been declined." The woman's shoulders slumped. "Could you try it again?" "I just got paid yesterday." The pharmacist ran the card a second time, then shook her head. "I'm afraid it's still not going through. Do you have another form of payment?" Alexander watched as the woman began emptying her wallet. A few crumpled bills, some coins, a collection of loyalty cards from various stores. Her hands trembled slightly as she counted out the money. "I have $27.43, she said finally. "The medicine is $32.99. Is there a generic version that might be cheaper?" "Not for this particular medication," the pharmacist replied, her tone sympathetic but firm. "It's the only children's version approved for his age group." The boy coughed again, a deep, rattling sound that made Alexander wince. The woman bit her lip, clearly calculating impossible math in her head. "Maybe I could put back the groceries," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "We could make do with what's at home for another day or two." Something about her quiet dignity, the matter-of-fact way she approached her dilemma without complaint or drama, struck Alexander. He was surrounded daily by people who wanted something from him: his money, his influence, his connections. This woman wanted nothing except medicine for her sick child, and she was willing to go hungry to get it. Before he could second-guess himself, Alexander stepped forward, pulling out his wallet. "I'll pay for it," he said, handing his black card to the pharmacist. The woman turned, startled. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "Please," Alexander insisted. "It's nothing." And it was nothing to him. The cost of the medicine wouldn't even register as a rounding error in his daily expenses. But the look of cautious relief on the woman's face suggested it was everything to her. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll pay you back if you give me your contact information." "That's not necessary," Alexander interrupted. Then, acting on an impulse he didn't fully understand, he added, Actually, why don't you keep the card for the day? Consider it a random act of kindness. The woman stared at him as if he'd suggested she fly to the moon. Keep your credit card? I couldn't possibly. For 24 hours, Alexander clarified, a plan forming in his mind. Until this time tomorrow. Use it however you see fit. The pharmacist, who had been watching this exchange with poorly concealed interest, cleared her throat. Sir, I'm not sure that's. It's fine, Alexander assured her, signing the receipt for the medicine. On the back, he quickly scribbled, unlimited funds for 24 hours. Show me what matters most. Then he handed it to the bewildered woman. I don't understand, she said, looking from the receipt to the black card the pharmacist had returned. Why would you do this? It was a fair question, and one Alexander wasn't entirely sure he could answer. Part of it was curiosity. What would someone who had nothing do with unlimited resources for a day? Part of it was that restlessness, that searching for something meaningful in a life that had become predictable despite all its privilege. Let's call it a social experiment, he said finally. My name is Alexander Morgan. The card is legitimate, I assure you. Use it until this time tomorrow, then return it to the Grand Meridian Hotel, where I'm staying. Ask for me at the front desk. I'm Sarah, the woman replied automatically, still looking stunned. Sarah Jenkins. And this is my son, Ethan. Alexander nodded to the boy, who had stopped coughing momentarily to stare at the strange man talking to his mother. Nice to meet you both. I look forward to hearing about your day tomorrow. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving his credit card with its unlimited balance and direct connection to his personal accounts in the hands of a complete stranger. It wasn't until he reached his car that the potential recklessness of his action hit him. He didn't know this woman. She could max out his card on luxury items, book a flight to another country, or simply disappear with it. While the financial loss wouldn't ruin him, it would be a significant inconvenience. Yet something told him Sarah Jenkins wouldn't do any of those things. There had been a weariness in her eyes, yes, but also an integrity that resonated with him. It was a gamble, but one he was suddenly eager to see play out. Back in his hotel suite, Alexander called his personal assistant. Jacob, I need you to monitor my primary credit card transactions for the next 24 hours. Don't stop anything, just keep a record. Is there a problem, sir? Jacob asked, concern evident in his voice. Has your card been compromised? No, nothing like that. I've loaned it to someone. As an experiment. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, Jacob said finally, in a tone that suggested he didn't see it all but knew better than to question his employer's eccentricities. I'll monitor the transactions and send you updates. Thank you, Jacob. And one more thing, I need you to find out whatever you can about a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She works in healthcare, possibly as a nurse, and has a young son named Ethan. They live here in Westbrook. Consider it done, sir. After ending the call, Alexander found himself strangely energized. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of anticipation, of not knowing what would happen next. It was a novel sensation for a man who had carefully controlled every aspect of his life since his parents' death 20 years ago. The first notification came through less than an hour later. Sarah had used his card at a grocery store, $127.84. A modest amount, likely for food and household necessities. Alexander felt a twinge of disappointment. It was a practical choice, certainly, but not particularly revealing. The second charge appeared 30 minutes after that, $215.33 at a children's clothing store. Again, reasonable for a mother with a growing child, but nothing unexpected. By evening, there had been several more charges. A gas station, $42.17, a pharmacy different from the one where they'd met, $86.92, and a department store, $193.45. All told, Sarah had spent less than $700, a remarkably restrained amount for someone given access to virtually unlimited funds. Alexander found himself checking his phone with increasing frequency, waiting for the notification that would signal Sarah had finally succumbed to temptation. A luxury purchase, perhaps, or a down payment on a car. But no such charge appeared. Instead, just after 8 p.m., a new type of transaction popped up: $1,500 to Westbrook Community College, listed as tuition payment. This was followed shortly by $750 to Sunshine Daycare Center. Now Alexander was intrigued. Sarah was using his card to invest in education, presumably her own, and childcare. Not frivolous expenses, but strategic ones aimed at improving her situation long-term. The next morning, Alexander woke to a flurry of notifications. Overnight, Sarah had been busy. There were payments to multiple utility companies, none over $300, and all with different names attached. A $2,000 payment to Westbrook General Hospital's Patient Assistance Fund. A $1,000 donation to the local food bank. 3 separate charges at different pharmacies, each between $50 and $100. She's paying other people's bills, Alexander murmured to himself, scrolling through the list with growing amazement. By noon, the pattern was unmistakable. Sarah was using his card not primarily for herself, but to help others. There were more tuition payments to the community college, rent payments to various apartment complexes, grocery store gift cards purchased in $100 increments, and a $5,000 donation to a women's shelter. The largest single charge came through at 2 p.m., $25,000 to Westbrook Children's Hospital, designated for the pediatric cancer ward. Alexander sat back in his chair, stunned. Given the opportunity to spend a billionaire's money however she wanted, Sarah Jenkins had chosen to spread it among people in need, people in situations likely similar to her own. At 3:30 p.m., Jacob called with the background information Alexander had requested. Sarah Jenkins, 34, single mother to Ethan Jenkins, age 6, Jacob reported. She's a licensed practical nurse at Westbrook General, working primarily in geriatrics. She also works weekend shifts at Sunshine Nursing Home and evenings at the hospital's call center for patient follow-ups. 3 jobs in total. What about family? Alexander asked. Her parents are deceased, car accident when she was in college. No siblings. She was married to Ethan's father, but he left when the boy was 2. No child support payments on record for the past 3 years. Financial situation? Precarious, Jacob said bluntly. Her apartment is in a low-income area. She has outstanding student loans of approximately $35,000 from her nursing program. Her checking account typically hovers near zero between paychecks, and she's been late on rent twice in the past 6 months. No savings to speak of. Her son has chronic asthma, which creates additional medical expenses not fully covered by her insurance. Alexander absorbed this information, comparing it with the way Sarah had chosen to use his card. Despite her own significant needs, she had prioritized helping others. One more thing, sir, Jacob added. Ms. Jenkins volunteers 3 hours every Sunday at the Children's Hospital, reading to kids in the oncology ward. She's been doing it for 4 years, since before her son was born. This final detail settled something in Alexander's mind. Thank you, Jacob. That will be all for now. At precisely 5 p.m., 24 hours after their encounter, Alexander waited in the lobby of the Grand Meridian. He had instructed the front desk to send Sarah directly to him when she arrived. He didn't have to wait long. At 5:10, the hotel doors opened, and Sarah Jenkins walked in, looking even more tired than she had the day before. She wore the same scrubs, suggesting she had come directly from work again. Beside her, Ethan looked considerably better, his color normal and the cough apparently subsided. Alexander stood as they approached, noting the way Sarah clutched his credit card tightly, as if afraid to lose it. Mr. Morgan, she said formally, extending the card toward him. Thank you for your extraordinary generosity. I've brought everything to document how the money was spent. She placed a folder on the table between them. I hope I didn't misuse your trust. Alexander accepted the card, but left the folder untouched. Why don't we discuss it over dinner? You both must be hungry. Sarah hesitated, glancing down at Ethan. That's very kind, but we shouldn't impose any further. I insist, Alexander said, already signaling to the hotel restaurant's maitre d'. I'm very interested to hear about your day. Perhaps too tired to argue or simply hungry, Sarah acquiesced. Soon they were seated in a private dining area, Ethan happily coloring on the children's menu, while Sarah sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable in the luxurious surroundings. "You look worried," Alexander observed after they had ordered. "There's no need to be. I've been monitoring the card transactions. I know how you spent the money." Sarah's eyes widened. "You were watching the whole time?" "Just the amounts and locations," he clarified. "Though I admit, I'm curious about the details. For instance, the multiple utility payments to different accounts." Some of the tension left Sarah's shoulders as she realized she wasn't in trouble. "Those were for patients at the nursing home where I work weekends. Many of them are on fixed incomes, and they have to choose between medication and keeping their lights on. I paid off the overdue balances for the ones I knew were struggling the most." "And the pharmacy charges?" "Similar situation. There's a support group for single parents at the community center. Several of them have children with chronic conditions, like Ethan's asthma. I picked up their prescriptions." She glanced at her son, lowering her voice. "One mother has been cutting her daughter's seizure medication in half to make it last longer. It's not safe, but she couldn't afford the full prescription." Alexander nodded, making a mental note to follow up on that particular situation. The donation to the children's hospital was substantial. For the first time, Sarah looked uncertain. "Was that too much?" "I wasn't sure what limits there were, and the pediatric oncology ward needs a new activity room. The one they have is, well, it's depressing, honestly. Children fighting cancer deserve a cheerful place to play." "It wasn't too much," Alexander assured her. "I'm just curious why that cause in particular." Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Ethan color. "My son spent 3 days in that ward when he was 4, she said finally. "Not for cancer. They thought he might have a tumor, but it turned out to be a severe infection. Those were the longest 3 days of my life. I saw what those families go through, the children and the parents. After Ethan recovered, I started volunteering there. It felt like the least I could do." Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. Alexander watched as Sarah made sure Ethan's meal was cut into appropriate sizes before touching her own food. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about her priorities. "You know," Alexander said after they had eaten in silence for a few minutes, "most people, given access to unlimited funds for a day, would have spent at least some of it on themselves. A new car, perhaps. Designer clothes. A vacation." Sarah looked up from her plate, her expression serious. "I did spend some on myself. The groceries, some clothes for Ethan, gas for my car. And I paid my tuition for next semester. I'm taking night classes to become a registered nurse. That's an investment in your future, not a luxury," Alexander pointed out. "Why didn't you pay off your student loans? Or put a down payment on a house?" She considered the question carefully. "It didn't feel right. You said to show you what matters most. What matters to me is helping people who are in the same situation I've been in, or worse. I know what it's like to choose between electricity and medicine, or to calculate whether you can make it to the next paycheck on the food in your pantry." She met his gaze directly. "Money solves immediate problems, Mr. Morgan, but it doesn't change systems. I could have spent your money on a house for myself, but that wouldn't help the next single mother who ends up in my situation." Alexander felt something shift inside him, a recognition, perhaps, of a truth he had been avoiding for years. "Call me Alexander, please." Sarah nodded, though she still looked uncomfortable with the familiarity. "May I ask why you did this?" "Give a stranger your credit card, I mean." It was Alexander's turn to consider his words carefully. "I wanted to see what someone would do when given resources without restrictions." "What?"